Good morning, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here as part of this webinar. My name is Sharon Palmer, and I have 25 years of experience working at Brooklyn Public Library. I am a regional director. I oversee 10 neighborhood libraries. And next, I'll pass it over to Leandre Peoples.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Leandre Peoples. I am the regional assistant for the Crown Heights region. I work alongside Sharon Palmer, overseeing the 10 locations in the Crown Heights region. And I'll pass it over to Taina.
Greetings, everyone. So happy to be here with you all on this, spring fling of a season. My name is Taina Evans. Likewise to my counterpart, Sharon Palmer. I oversee 10 locations. I have 18 years of experience here of librarianship, and I'm happy to talk with you all about leading with empathy.
Good morning, everyone. So I'll kind of just give a brief overview of the agenda. Some of the things that we will talk about is we will go into the introduction. We will speak about the background to how we got to the space of leading with empathy, compassion, and intuition. We will speak about ECI. We will speak about the support that is received at ways, and we will end it with our bibliography at the end.
Okay, and many of you have signed up to have some takeaways and outcomes, right? And what we will hope that you gather from our presentation is the understanding and importance of empathy in creating a supportive and inclusive team environment. We want you to recognize and implement strategies for developing compassion as a leadership trait, encompassing understanding and addressing them through team member challenges, setbacks effectively, and really understanding the concepts of intuition, the role that it plays in decision-making and problem solving. So throughout this hour, we also want you to practice techniques for assessing and trusting intuitively insights through leadership. But first, I want to lead you all through a poll. And feel free, I know some of you are actively and engaged. Tracy asked everyone to introduce yourself. So I see folks from Queens Memory Project, Fairport Public Library, Bronx Community College, welcome, Brooklyn Methodist. So what we would like for you to do now is also utilizing the chat. You have four options, excuse me, about decision-making, right? And so what we would like to know is how decision-making can be made from your perspective. Can it either be made through intuition, through your inner voice, through compassion, through data analytics, or all of the above? And I will put it in the chat, the options. Again, for the folks that are in the room, how do you feel decision making at your library or within your role? How can it be made? And again, the choices are through intuition, through inner voice, through compassion, through data analytics, and the last one is all of the above. All right, I see all of the above, all but leaning on some things more, depending on the situation, absolutely. And I will second it, not just analytics alone. Okay, of course, it depends on the situation. Compassion and data analytics. That's an awesome way to evaluate your decision-making skills, all of the above, but intuition is informed by analytics, stakeholders, conversation, and inner voice. Okay, I really, I'm smiling at that reflective thought right there. So it definitely, as we delve through the presentation, definitely going to have some parallels with this poll and what we have going on today. All right, well, thank you for that. Most of you have selected all. And we can move along to our background.
Thank you so much for the poll. It's good to see that, people are on the same wavelength for the most part. All the qualities are essential. And so with that in mind, I go to the background. So in 2019, we experienced a pandemic, a world pandemic, and this was unprecedented and very traumatic. And so many people lost loved ones. So many people are still suffering the effects of that pandemic. And so I say to you that today, library workers are still suffering the effects and of long COVID symptoms, and some are even suffering from mental health conditions. And so with these effects of the pandemics, what we found, and I know it's not unique to Brooklyn Public Library, you find that some staff are just showing up to work, what we call silent quitting. So they're coming to work, they're doing the basics or not sometimes, and then they're just going back home. And then you have high employee turnover. So some people are coming into work and then you get them working with us for maybe 2 years, 3 years, and then you got to do the recruitment process again. And then you see frequent staff turnover. So you're forever doing recruitment. All of my panelists and myself, we are participating in recruitment and we are constantly recruiting staff. And then it's time consuming to recruit because you start to recruit, you onboard, people get trained, they spend a little time, and then repeat. You have to do it again. And all of this we found from the effects of the pandemic. And so this is why we decided to do the ECI. At Brooklyn Public Library, we love acronyms. So the empathy, the intuition, and the compassion, and that's where it came from. And so these trends have highlighted the need for better workplace culture and employee support within libraries. And here at Brooklyn Public Library, we have been supporting staff as they navigate through this process. And so hence the reason ECI, as I mentioned, empathy, compassion, and intuition. And so for me, I know, and for my colleagues, after the pandemic, as leaders, as supervisors, we found that we needed to do something different because, a lot of staff was struggling, a lot of staff, they were hurting, and they still are. And so we needed to do something to motivate them and to encourage them and to move that needle towards better and a more efficient productivity.
So one of the things that we do want to do is be able to speak to what each word means, right? And here we have empathy, right? And just understanding what empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, right? Leaders who are empathetic can build strong relationships, one, right? And this is by recognizing and validating emotions. Empathetic leaders create trust and rapport with their teams. Empathetic leaders also improve communication, right? It's understanding the emotions and the perspectives of others. It helps leaders communicate in ways that resonate with their team members. It also enhances the team morale. A leader who acknowledges challenges and feelings creates a supportive environment, which also boosts morale as well as collaboration among staff.
So I'm going to talk about the C in the ECI model, which is about compassion, right? And ideally, how do you show compassion to others? Compassion really extends beyond empathy to include the desire to help and support others in meaningful ways. So as a leader, you are thinking really define compassion for others. You show genuine care, right? As a leader, you want to help team members that, through adversity. Sharon talked about the COVID pandemic. So what we found is that we really had to support team members face challenges both professionally and personally. We got a window into their home because many people were working from home. And then we also was able to work with team members in ways that we didn't before, right? Things were left at the door, and 2020 and beyond brought a different type of leadership style, where we focus and encourage well-being. As a compassionate leader, you're going to focus on your reducing stress, reducing burnout, fostering a more positive and productive workplace. And last, how do you show compassion through inclusivity? Compassionate leadership ensures that everyone feels valued, included, which can lead to increased team cohesion and innovation.
intuition, or what we like to call sometimes that inner voice that sometimes you can't explain it, but you just get a feeling in your gut. This is intuition. And this is the ability to understand something instinctively without the need to be conscious about the reasoning. And it's like intuitive leaders. You do not know how you know, but you just know you know, and you can react on that. And then you make timely decisions, relying on both the data, as we mentioned, as well as the instinct. And that allows intuitive leaders to make quick and confident decisions, especially when the situation might be uncertain. And then there are some underlying issues where intuition can help leaders recognize patterns or problems that may not be obvious, enabling them to address the issues before they escalate. And most importantly, being able to adapt to change. Intuitive leaders can more easily adjust their approach when new information or challenges arise, helping their teams stay agile and resistant. And I know for myself, I practice all three, but especially, the intuition is so important because as I said, sometimes you don't know, and I'm sure everyone on this webinar can attest to that. And that has helped me tremendously throughout my years of leadership in knowing what to say and guiding the staff. I'll give you a quick example. One day I was at home, and like I said, I manage 10 neighborhood libraries. And before I set out for work, I was debating, okay, what to do? Should I go to which branch? I wasn't sure which one of the 10 to go to. And then all of a sudden, the little voice said to me, go to branch X. I wouldn't call the name. And so I went there. And when I went there, I was pleasantly surprised because usually I don't tell staff I'm coming because I like it to be, flowing and not to have them think, oh, the supervisor is coming. I have to put my best foot forward. So I want to see things as are. And so when I went, I spoke to one of the managers and I said, hey, how are things? It's a Friday. I don't have a meeting today. And I just wanted to check and see how you're doing. And the person confided in me that, since the pandemic, they suffered a nervous breakdown. And I don't know if the rest of the staff, maybe they didn't know, but the person confided in me because I have that rapport. And I was able to give guidance and, and say, hey, find joy in the things that you enjoy and your passion and do more and go out, whether it is to take a walk, enjoy nature. And then another one shared that they were going through some financial difficulty. And again, I was able to just be that listening ear to the staff. And I was pleasantly surprised because I did not know where I was going to go, which location, but the little intuition, that little inner voice said to me, go to this location. And so for me, that's how the intuition works. I can't explain it, but I just know.
So what we'll do is we'll talk about different ways to practice ECI. I'll start with empathy, right? It's being an empathetic leader and actively listening and understanding the perspectives, emotions, and experiences of others, right? This fosters trust, open communication, and deeper connections with teams, making people feel valued and heard.
Yes, and when you think about compassion and compassionate leadership, it's not only understanding the challenges of others, but also, taking the proactive step to help. Compassionate leadership leads to creating supportive environments where individuals can thrive, driving loyalty and engagement. But what does that look like, right? First, as a compassionate leader, you have to treat yourself with the same compassion and kindness that you would show for others. So rather than beating yourself up over a decision that you made or a mistake that you had made in the past, you feel understanding, you feel mindful and accepting of yourself and your imperfections. Compassion for others, when you experience that, you're kind of compelled to take action to do what you can for that individual to make the situation better, or you find a way to relieve their suffering. It might be they had a hard time at the desk and you want to tell them to, step away from the desk a little bit so that they can have a reprieve. Those are ways to kind of practice ECI in your work, but we'll talk more about it as we continue on with the presentation.
And then intuition. Leaders often rely on their inner voice, like I mentioned, that inner sense or gut feeling when making decisions, especially in uncertain or complex situations. Intuitive leadership helps in recognizing patterns, understanding situations quickly, and making timely decisions. So again, it's so important when you incorporate all three. I'll give you a quick example. One morning, again, I was going to my home branch, and then my little inner voice said, no, go to this branch. And so I went. And when I went, I was able to have the branch opened on time because, staff shortages, a lot of us can attest to that, and it resonates. And so that day, there was only one employee to open. And of course, you're not able to open with one employee. You need at least two. And so my presence there enabled the branch to open as scheduled. So again, for me, the intuition is so important, and I have learned, not to question because I can't explain it, but I just know when I know. And usually it works out really well.
So understanding the types of engagement as a leader, think about it in terms of a spectrum of empathy. The effort that you put in and would be on one axis, and then understanding and engagement will be on another axis. It's going from pity to compassion. And what does this look like in terms of engagement? When you feel pity for someone, you ideally are saying, I feel sorry for you. I'm sorry that happened. I'm just sorry that you're in that situation. When you move up in terms of your effort of empathy, you have the next level, which is sympathy, which is I feel for you. I really feel that you're in a bad situation. I feel, that something might be troubling you. Next is empathy, which is I feel with you, right? Like, tell me more about this. How is this making you feel? I feel that situation as well as you do, and lastly is compassion. I am moved by what you're going through, and I'm going to take action. And again, to reiterate what Sharon discussed, the intuition is a side of the spectrum of empathy, but it's also, you can have a gut feeling when making a decision to have a level of empathy. Your gut feeling can tell you to engage with more effort, and maybe you can go down that to just pity, right? It's not a right and a wrong. Each situation calls for the types of support that you can give to your team members as a leader.
And the importance of ECI. As we mentioned, together, these three qualities create a leadership style that is more human-centered, responsive, and capable of navigating the complexities of modern work environments. And this approach helps build trust, loyalty, and resilience in teams. So I just want to add that it's important that you see your employees as human beings. And it's, yes, the work needs to be done. However, if you take that robotic approach without taking into consideration the ECI components, you're less likely to get staff that are suffering from burnout. They may be belligerent, and they may not want to engage and collaborate and practice teamwork. And so this is why we found that, you see people for who they are, because as we mentioned before, especially since the pandemic, a lot of staff are struggling. Some have confided in me, they're going through, their parents are aging, they themselves may have some health conditions, they may have loved ones with health conditions. And so when you factor that in, and also I want to mention, and it's in our bibliography, there was a New York Times article, librarians face a crisis of violence and abuse. It was in the New York Times, and the author was C. Caron, and it was 2024. When I read that article, it made me realize how much staff face on the front line. More and more patrons are coming in, if you're a public library and you're facing the mental health conditions, you're facing more patrons coming in who may be unhoused, and so many social services and conditions. And librarians are asked to do this and to wear so many hats and do that in the face of staff shortages. And so when you factor in what staff are going through, on their home front, even though we say it should not affect the professional life, however, we know that sometimes it's hard to separate it. And then you come at work and you have to wear so many hats. And some staff don't feel supported. According to the columnists, some staff said that they are facing, little conflicts with the administration and then everything that we mentioned. And so combined, it makes it really difficult for staff. And so it's essential that we really provide that much needed support for the staff.
Okay, so there's a quote from Maya Angelou is, I think we all have empathy. We may not have enough courage to display it. So let me, in the next couple of slides, talk about a topic, and I just want to prepare the room. This is, it could feel heavy, but again, just I'm just expressing how support looks like at BPL. So if it might be traumatizing to talk about grief and loss, which is the topic in the next slide, I just want to be mindful and respectful of that. And if you need to take a moment to sit with the information, I know the recording is going to be available later, but I just want to talk about how this manifested at BPL. Okay, so another result of the pandemic was there were a lot of family members of staff personnel who were lost, and a lot of staff members who were dealing with grief. There were a number of incidents that happened after that as well, where you have a colleague who may pass suddenly or unalive themselves while they're performing their duties. And there's a lot of responses, right? It's sadness, anger, and guilt. And as a manager and a supervisor, those feelings are sometimes met at your door. And so as a leader, in order to effectively translate the ECI model to help someone professionally and personally, there's different types of encouragement and engagement that we had fostered in order to really implement how we encourage others through this time. And so an example of grief, everyone has their temperament and how they respond to grief. And grief is a very personal experience that staff members are dealing with. And so you may see your children's librarian who was once bubbly is now a little bit reserved. Or you'll see, maybe even the custodian, is dealing with numbness or sadness, right? What you can do for that staff person is really just be patient and empathetic. Listen carefully without judgment if they do talk with you, and just show respect for that process. As a manager, what we did, at least in my region, we try to create a safe space for staff to express their grief. And so we work with representative from our employee assistance program to offer, a day or a couple of times where we gather the entire staff together to talk about their shared feelings and experience. So as a manager, you don't have to take on the onus of taking on that grief, right? Just providing that safe space so that staff can feel supported is definitely part of that ECI model, and then also, open that communication up. When it's a loss, you can definitely acknowledge that loss publicly. So, you know, you want to maybe you can send like a email saying with the unfortunate passing of XYZ, we want to respect the family at this time, or we want to support the staff person at this time. It can also help validate the feelings and also have that communal support within the team. And one example of what we did in terms of that loss is we provide time off or had like that flexible work arrangement for that person who were dealing with the loss or several staff members who were dealing with the loss. And so as a team, we went to a couple of locations and just kind of supported them, took over their work for the day or two, just so that they can, you know, get back and have that healing happen. Suicide, you know, it can happen. We all work and live in New York, and so it's no stranger of something in the news feed. You know, as a manager, you can provide trainings on recognizing the warning signs of suicidal thoughts. You can work again with a partner organization that could, you know, support how awareness can lead to timely intervention. Also, if you have like a social worker on site, you know, you can talk about mental health resources, or you can work with the human resources department just to leave like literature around the branch, including counseling service and crisis hotlines, because you know, they may not talk with you about it, but at least you created that safe space for them to get the information that they need about it. And then, you know, with death, moments of silence also honor the colleagues or members of your libraries that may have passed away, fostering a sense of closure and remembrance. And again, grief counseling is a great service that you can offer to your team. And it could be offered individually or it can be offered in a group. And as a manager, you just want to, you know, be patient with your staff. And all through the process, right? Whether it's grief or loss, we just ask that managers create that supportive community. And it's vital for the supervisors to kind of foster an environment where staff feel comfortable expressing their grief. Is a traumatic experience if you're going through something and then your workplace also isn't as supportive, right? Because a lot of our staff members spend a majority of their day at work. And so you may hear that and you may want to take the person aside and just have regular check-ins like, hey, you know, I know you're going through something. Let's set up a couple of meetings, regular check-ins, just so I can make sure that you're okay and that you have the support that you need. And supervisors, you know, or leaders, you know, look at webinars like this and other trainings where you can get support on grief management or suicide prevention so that you can have a deeper understanding and awareness to better support your team. And so those workshops would really enhance your preparedness.
So while we have spoken about how the pandemic has had effects on us, we also, as leaders and as staff members, we also want to remain steadfast and understand what the current environments are. There are many things that we face, anything from workplace challenges, right, to safety concerns. And, you know, as it states, right, you know, library workers, you know, they do face significant stress due to increased demands, limited resources, which often leads to burnout. And, you know, burnout can affect us in so many different ways, right? And like I said, the pandemic exacerbated these issues. As staff, we're expected to maintain high service levels while adapting to new health protocols and remote interactions. You know, when you're dealing with safety concerns, many library workers encounter verbal and physical abuse from patrons, like Sharon said previously, right? And these experiences, from homelessness to mental health crises, this is not only creating a hostile environment, but also contributes to trauma and mental fatigue among staff. You want to provide support for the vulnerable, right? Libraries serve as critical safe havens for vulnerable groups, including the homeless and those with mental health challenges. However, right, inadequately addressing these needs can be difficult when real stretch with resources and staff. You also deal with conflict with administration. Many library workers often experience conflicts with administrators regarding resource allocation and operational decisions. And the lack of support from management can lead to feelings of isolation and dissatisfaction among staff. Many face challenges of intellectual freedom, right? Where you're defending intellectual freedom remains a pressing issue in libraries. Workers may feel pressured to enforce policies that contradict their values, leading to ethical dilemmas and diminished job satisfaction. We also have the community engagement, right? As libraries, we strive to rebuild social connections. Post-pandemic, fostering supportive community among staff and patrons. And it's important, right? Creating inclusive programs that resonate with diverse populations can help libraries. It helps regain their role as vital community centers, right? We are a hub for many of our communities, right? There is a lack of, let's say, community centers. There's a lack of spaces for let's say, our children to go, our teens to go and find a place to reside, find a safe haven, right? And it becomes, we are truly that. We are a safe haven for many, as well as being a space of resources.
And so I wanted to mention this because I had read about this philosopher, Lao Tzu, and I share it wherever I go. So what Lao Tzu said is that if you are depressed, you are living in the past. And it's easy to live in the past because I remember during the pandemic, a lot of folks, including myself, we were like, oh my gosh, I remember when I used to be able to go and have, dinner with my friends or go to the theater. And then when the pandemic, with the onset and throughout, at the beginning, everyone was on shore and we were told to stay in your own pod, stay with your own family. You couldn't socialize. So this gave rise to a lot of people looking back like, oh my gosh, when can I go back? When can life go back to what it was? And so this is where Lao Tzu said that if you are depressed, you are living in the past because you're looking backwards. Now, if you are anxious, you are looking towards the future. And again, it's easy to do that because the mind is powerful. And so even me, sometimes you'll be thinking, oh my gosh, during the pandemic, when can it go back to what it was? When can I be able to go and socialize and have life like it was? And so again, sometimes we think about thoughts in the future. And if that's happening, we are living in the future. We are anxious. And, it's easy to be anxious. Like Taina says, we live in New York City. Everything is fast paced and we're always thinking about what to do next. However, if you are at peace, then you are living in the present. And this is the philosophy of Lao Tzu, a Chinese philosopher who lived centuries ago. And it's easy. And so for myself, sometimes I practice it because if I think that my thoughts are going, a mile a minute, then I realize, uh-oh, I'm living in the future. I'm too anxious and I need to slow it down. And this is hard, because again, we lead busy lives. There's always a deadline. There's always something to take care of, whether it's on the home front, whether it's on the professional side. And so I hope that you take this away in terms of if you find yourself in this scenario, understand that in order to be at peace, you have to live in the moment. And while it might be hard, it's necessary for your self-care and for your whole well-being. And so I found this quote also, and I found it was really applicable to the presentation today. Intuition most often is a sense that gives you a present feeling of future consequences. This isn't psychic or different from other sensory experiences. You can see a mountain far off in the distance before you arrive there and can touch and smell it. You can hear an approaching car before it arrives and would know it's coming even with your eyes closed. And this quote is taken from Do Zantamata, and I found that she had some really positive teachings and outlook. And so if you are interested, I invite you to explore some more. Before we go to the next slide, when Taina was talking about grief, a couple of thoughts came to my mind, and I wanted to share with you some of the support here at Brooklyn Public Library. In Taina's region, unfortunately, there were a few staff members, actually active members who were working, who passed away. And so that was very traumatic for the staff, for all of us. And so what we did, senior management showed support by going to the branch and doing the work for the day, the public service work. And that enabled the staff at the branch to be able to attend the funerals of their colleagues and loved ones. And so we showed support that way. There was another one, I remember Taina and I went to the repast with other colleagues, and we met with the staff, and we also met with the relatives of the deceased. And they were very appreciative that we came, and we ended up laughing and sharing memories about the deceased colleague. And then there was another one that was really tough. This was one of our colleagues. It touched home, a regional director at Brooklyn Public Library for 38 years. And, she passed away suddenly. And so she was beloved. And what we did as our team of regional directors, because we have 5 at the time, now 6, we went to the 10 locations that regional supervised. And we just, as Taina said, we gave that space and allowed the staff to speak about their grief. And I know that staff appreciated it, because I remember when I went to the home branch, I looked at the staff and I said, I'm not a social worker or a psychiatrist. I said, but I just brought myself, and I just wanted you to know that I stand in solidarity in grief with you. And staff appreciated it. They shared lots of stories about, how the person had touched their lives in a very positive manner. And I think it's so important, to make that space, as Taina said, for, the grief and the process. And everyone heals differently. And, it's never going to go away. However, it's important that you address it and you don't just cover it over. And so I just wanted to mention that, because as Taina was speaking, I guess call it intuition, that popped in my head that I should share this with this audience. So thank you for giving me that space.
We have a mentee poll, just so that we can, work with you all in real time, right? Here's the scenario. A team member is arriving to work late 2 to 3 times per week due to a chronic illness. How would you respond to this? All right, so it stopped moving a bit. Most of you would call for compassion. It's moving a little bit, so I'm just seeing, yeah. So a majority of you will respond compassionately. A few of you would, have empathy for the situation. So it's like, I understand that you're going through something, but, we might need some workaround. And sympathy is like, whoa, that's happening. What can we do to address that? And then pity is like, oh, I'm sorry that's happening for you. Ideally, the first and second is where you want to go as a supervisor, and maybe if you're a sympathetic leader, that's okay too, right? Maybe that's where you need to be in order to meet that person where they are. But with the ECI model, we definitely want to think about how to encourage team members, and Sharon will walk us through these takeaways.
Okay, thank you, Taina. So for the tips and takeaways, be respectful. This is so important. Regardless of who you're speaking with, it's always good to be respectful, whether they're a part-timer, whether they're clerical, librarian, be respectful, or a patron. Encourage your team members, very important, and I say to the staff, in order to encourage the staff, you need to be excited about the work that you're doing. You need to be motivating the staff. And in order to do that, you need to show your passion and your enthusiasm. And then it translates into, hey, I'm here for you. I can support you. Express gratitude. I don't know about you folks, but after the pandemic, my gratitude level went up even more, just simply to be alive. I remember I did something with the managers and I said, what are you grateful for? And some people said life, their job, And, before I was busy. And after the pandemic, when we had all that time to reset, I found myself, really enjoying nature, taking a walk, looking at the trees, looking at the flowers. Before I was so busy, sometimes running from A to B. And now, even though I might still be busy, I take time and I'm ever grateful, just to wake up, just to be able to smell the air, even if it might be a little polluted now with the pollen. However, gratitude, always be grateful. And then find joy and practice work life. Whatever you do, find joy, whether it's a hobby, whether it's something that you enjoy, because, you turn on the news and you see the world is in turmoil and there's always something negative. For me, if I put on the television and I see 3 negative pieces of news, I take it off. Recently I put it on the television and I saw that somebody got shot in the hand, somebody got shot in the head, and then there was another one. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're inundated with all of this negativity. And while I know it's life, just having all of that, it does not help your whole well-being. And so find joy, whatever it is, meeting friends, meeting family, doing a program, doing painting, whatever. Just find joy and practice that work-life balance, because if all you do is work, 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 you're going to find that it lead to burnout and it's going to be detrimental for your entire well-being. And again, Taina talked about compassion. Practice compassion for self as well as for others. So important. And then practice active listening, because so many times, we are eager to share a story or to talk, but how good are we in terms of active listening to the staff, and it's so important. I remember once a supervisor said at a training, she said, when I became a supervisor, I talk less and I listen more. And that is important, because sometimes that intuition, when I go and I visit staff, they may slip something in and they say it so quickly. And I know from experience that if I ask them to repeat it, they're going to clam up. So I have to be always listening to hear what they are saying. And then finally, but last but not least, try to avoid judgment. Unless you walk in someone's shoes, you really do not know what they are facing. And this is so important, in the workplace, in the private sphere, because so many people, like we have mentioned, are struggling and they are alluding to, different things that they're going through. And not everyone will talk. Some of my staff will come to me and they will share confidences and let me know what's happening with them. But then there are others, many others, who struggle in silence. And so what I try to do, and I have learned over the years, is, I would see something and I would say, okay, you know what? This is happening. However, I'll try not to pass judgment, because you really do not know. And then there are sometimes when people let you in and they give you that background story, and then you're like, oh my goodness, I have nothing to complain about. Look at what somebody else is going through. And so we have a quote from Plato. And so be kind. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle. And, when I saw this quote, it made me realize Plato lived centuries ago, renowned Greek philosopher. And so the more things change, the more they don't. This is so true, even in today's world. And so we have this bibliography, and you can see it. You can take a photo of it for your reference. And I alluded to the article with the librarians on the front line, what they experience. And if you have not yet read it, I encourage you to do so. It's an eye-opener for especially the library workers on the front line. Okay, and this concludes our presentation. Our contact information is here. And once again, I would like to thank Tracy, Mark, and the staff at Metro for this wonderful opportunity in presenting to you about leading with empathy, compassion, and intuition.